Well, you would think that he's clearly insane, but what if the whole thing is just a ruse and he's just the smartest guy that you've ever seen and just making it look like he's absolutely crazy?
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Doug Defends, the show where a real lawyer talks about fake things. I am Billy Business. This is my real lawyer, Doug Ridley.
I am the real lawyer.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room real quick.
Yeah.
We took a little bit of an unplanned break.
Yes, we did.
I had a little medical emergency. I'm okay. But I do want to give a quick PSA. This is for everybody, but let's be real. This is mostly for guys because guys have this problem the most. If you feel something weird in your body or something's not right, don't sit on it. Go to the doctor. Just get it looked at because you never know. It could be something small. Could be something that they catch really early. But guys, stop suffering in silence and go to the doctor. Listen to your significant other who's been hounding you because they are correct.
Yes, I would agree completely. And my wife, as she's watching this, is probably thinking, oh, wow, there's a family where the husband suffers in silence. My husband is the biggest baby in the entire world. He doesn't suffer anything in silence.
There really is no middle ground when it comes to men.
Pinky finger really hurts a lot. And yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'll complain ad nauseum about a fingernail at home, but then if something serious happens, my wife will be like, go to the doctor. I'll be like, I don't want to, you know?
Yeah, I stubbed my toe and it really, really hurt. I remember this is years ago. And finally I was like, I'm going to the ER. Like, it's gotta be broken. And she said, well, what do you think they're going to do if it's broken? They're going to tape it to the other toe. Cause this is my pinky toe, you know? I mean, come on. And as it turns out, it was broken. So I got my validation.
Okay. Well, that's good.
And you know what they did?
Taped it to your
They
toe.
taped it to my other toe. And that was it. And Rory had actually offered to tape my pinky toe to my other toe for me and save me the trip and the wait and all of those things. But it could not be a pinky toe. It could be something life-threatening, and I'm glad you're okay.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, I'm glad that Hannibal Lecter wasn't the one who was treating me.
This is true. Speaking of doctors.
Yeah, because today we are talking about 1990's Silence of the Lambs. Now, this came out, believe it or not, Valentine's Day weekend,
Yes.
which is what I was trying to aim for when we were going to film this, because I just think it's hilarious. I want to know, did you take a significant other at the time to Silence of the Lambs?
I don't think that this is pre-Rory, and I can't imagine that the girl I was dating at the time would have been up for Silence of the Lambs. I did see it in the theater, though. I mean, and this is back before I turned into a big baby about spooky films or horror movies or anything like that. I don't watch the new stuff that's out now that everybody loves.
It's too much. It's too much.
It's
This is about the edge of my threshold of scary movies.
Yeah, I mean and this I think why it's so brilliant is that it's not a slasher film. It's a psychological thriller where you're creeped out on a regular basis the whole time, and that unsettling, uncertain, feeling that you had going the whole way through. So, but I also thought as I was watching it, I mean, Hannibal Lecter calls Clarice at the end of the meeting, and she's got to go grab the phone that they just leave the phone on top of the wall. On top because it's mounted to the wall. So kids, we used to have phones that were actually attached to the wall
with a cord.
Yeah. I mean, if you had the long cord, you could potentially sit down, but if you didn't, you were standing like right there.
It better be a very compelling conversation to have me stand there.
We were talking about how the concept of dialing someone's number no one understands these days. I mean, certainly not my kids, that dial means
Rotary.
and rotary
Yeah.
phone. I mean, that's why we say dial a number. Why wouldn't we say press a number if it was today's technology?
We were mostly a cordless phone growing up, so I never really had to struggle too much with the cord situation. I was born just at the right time.
I can remember when I finally got a phone in my room.
Oh, big deal.
Second phone in the house was a big deal. Yeah.
Second number?
Yeah, and then a second number. I got my own number.
Oh.
So then that way we didn't all have to wait for somebody to be off the phone before I could talk to my girlfriend for 3 hours.
Yep, that stayed the same, because I also like after 9 p.m. the first ring, you immediately had to do it so it didn't wake up mom and dad, and then you talk to them for 3 hours.
Exactly. There you go.
I don't even know what we talked about for that long.
Yeah.
Certainly not Silence of the Lambs.
Certainly not Silence of the Lambs.
I saw Silence of the Lambs for the first time in my 20s, and I did see it on the third date with my now wife.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of does tie into the Valentine's Day thing.
Seeing it as an adult,
Yeah.
it would have been hyped up a lot.
There were so many cultural references to it by that point that it was a little hard to separate some of those bigger iconic moments, but there was a lot still in that movie that was very compelling that hadn't been parodied to death, at least to me at that point.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just such a good, almost like Dateline-esque type true crime story.
Yeah.
And this was back in 2013, so this was before the huge boom of true crime docs on Netflix and stuff. So I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I still think it's fantastic.
It is, and it holds up because it doesn't feel like any sort separate from the phone on the wall. I mean, but truly, the rest of it, it's not relying on technology. It's a actor person driven story, and it's super compelling. Freaks me the heck out still.
Yeah. No, I had to psych myself out to rewatch this, even
Yeah.
though I knew it was not as bad as I had built it up in my head for 20 some odd years.
Yeah, I was like, oh, well, one night this week I'm going to have to watch Silence of the Lambs to prep for the show. So here we are.
Well, we are not a rotary telephone show.
We got to get shirts made with that.
We are a legal show. And this one I'd say is interesting for us because normally we talk about fantastical things. We, even though this is fictional, this is probably the closest we've gotten to an actual crime case that is somewhat believable in our real world.
Yeah.
There's no Gotham City or why didn't they finally shut down Access Chemicals argument. There's a lot of questions that I have for you that I feel like topics we don't usually get to talk about.
Yeah.
So just to give a little bit of background, if someone hasn't seen the movie for a while or whatnot, the FBI is looking for a serial killer named Buffalo Bill. They send Clarice, who's the amazing Jodie Foster, to go talk to Hannibal Lecter. He makes a deal with her that he'll help her out if she kind of gives some personal information about herself, because he gets off on that kind of thing. And eventually Lecter has this amazing escape scene that is pretty gross. It's pretty gross, and we'll talk about it. But through their interactions, he gets away, but she eventually finds Buffalo Bill, James Gum, and there's that amazing. He had kidnapped. Was it the mayor or senator's daughter?
Yeah,
and was keeping her captive as his next victim. And there's that amazing sequence where he shuts off all the power, and we see it all with those night vision goggles.
Yeah,
and I think to your point, it's the most tense part of this entire movie, it's not a bunch of blood and gore and violence. It's just two people in the dark and one of them can see. And you're just like, oh no.
Yeah. That was it's hard to watch. And I mean, gosh, we talk sometimes about the power of the actors that are in these shows that we're reviewing and discussing the legal aspects of, and Jodie Foster in that scene itself, if you don't remember, it's all got this green glow because it's night vision goggles, but you can see every terrified moment on her face, and she's shaking, and it's just, that is, I think probably the most not talked about moment in that movie, but one of the most powerful. We think so much about the Lecter mask, and we think about the butterfly, or the moths, and and all the different aspects of this show. But that's the one that stays with you.
And again, I know a lot of people know this, but in case your memory has kind of the Mandela effect, Hannibal Lecter's only in this movie for like less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
He's barely in this thing.
He just like Brando levels of Godfather.
He just makes such an impact. But I agree, that end part, especially, I assume it hadn't really been done before, the fake out with the editing they do where you think the FBI has shown up at his house and it's not his house.
Yes.
And Clarice is actually somewhere else.
Yeah.
I remember that being like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's talk about Hannibal Lecter for a second, because here's a guy who's a former psychiatrist. Obviously, he's a psycho cannibal now.
Right.
Hyper intelligent.
Yes.
Do you think that he qualifies for an insanity plea by any stretch of, we'll call it California law because that's where we are. I know they're not, but it just feels like he's just so with it,
Right. Well, and that's what you see, is you see him so diabolically clever and insightful, and he's the smartest guy in any room. I mean, and that's the service that he's bringing to the FBI and to Clarice. And the way that they evaluate him for, is he not guilty by reason of insanity, or should he be placed in that kind of an institution, is it's all of the way that his thinking is completely twisted and backwards from a normal human's, and that is what brings him across the threshold to actually qualify for that. I find it fascinating to think about the trial of Hannibal Lecter, and I know that there's some other stories around.
Right.
There's the Manhunter and Red Dragon, and and all of those other ancillary sources, but I haven't really explored that. And so just looking at this, thinking about a trial for somebody who is that brilliant, how do you send somebody in to evaluate someone like that?
Right.
And that really is I think the biggest challenge is, if I had Hannibal Lecter as a client, and it was very, very clear that he had done what he was accused of and all of that. So now we've got to figure out, okay, so what do you do? I got to believe that the only way that you would be able to evaluate Dr. Hannibal Lecter and get him found and declared insane is if he thought that was a good idea.
Right. I was going to say, because he's a former psychiatrist, so
Right.
he knows what the threshold of insanity is, I would assume. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he would have to, and he's done all of these evaluations of other people, and his insight into other people is what makes him useful. So, I mean, imagine for a second if Lecter wanted to not be found incompetent, not be found insane, not guilty by reason of insanity. There's no question that he's smart enough of a person that he could have faked it.
Right. He
well
would know
enough.
what to
Yeah,
say.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't say that I can't understand the difference between right and wrong, or that I think that this is appropriate, or anything along those lines. So that part of the process is really, really fascinating to me. I have clients that I work with these days who I believe have a mental health issue that makes it hard for them to understand what's going on, hard for them to communicate. And I have psychologists and doctors that evaluate them, and sometimes they present really, really well that one day.
Yeah.
And so what I will often do is if a doctor comes in and says, no, this is a person who's totally competent. They understand what's going on. They might have some mental health issues, but it's not to that level of serious. I'll get a second opinion, because who's to say that they're going to present that well on another day? And when I have declared that doubt as to someone's insanity, and I can't get a doctor to agree, but I see it, it's a very frustrating part of the process, because you want to avail yourself of that aspect of the legal system. And I've been very frustrated sometimes where I'm the only one that sees what's going on. So then am I the one that's crazy?
Right. Have you ever had it the other way around, where you've had a client that's like, I'm insane, and you're like, no, you're not?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's rare for me to have the discussion of the big picture, the capital I insanity defense in cases. I don't see that often, and I don't even hear it being used as often as it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. What I see a whole lot more of are these different layers of mental health issues that come into play. And in California, we have a mental health diversion program that if there's a nexus between a mental health disorder and someone's criminal conduct, and you can prove that, and we can establish a treatment plan that puts them back on the right path and assures that they're not going to commit more crimes,
right,
then we put them into that program. So I see that a whole lot more than the big picture insanity defense. I also don't do big, huge capital murder cases in my firm. That's just a choice that I made a long time ago. So it is more likely to be something that someone that does capital cases on a regular, big first degree murder, death penalty cases is going to see more often.
You just don't really hear about it that much in the news. It's mostly like a movie TV thing where you see it the most.
Yeah, exactly. And the statutes are still there. There's still a provision for even temporary insanity and all of these different things. But the tools that we have here now are so much better. I had a client who was on a date with his girlfriend, headed up camping, and had a complete mental breakdown. Like, no one could understand him anymore. And he ended up pulling over to the side of the road. They called 911. And after all of the disagreement between them and scuffle and police coming and scuffle with the police and all of that, he ended up being charged with kidnapping and domestic violence and like everything you could possibly throw at the kid. But we got him through that by getting him medicated, figuring out what happened with the mental break, and now he's on a diversion program. And there's protection in place, for the girl that he was with, because obviously she's really traumatized. But I see that scenario more. In the olden times, could that have been a temporary insanity defense? Yeah, sure. But this tool is such a better tool now. So I find myself using this other tool rather than insanity defenses all the time.
I want to ask about, this isn't exactly one-to-one to Hannibal Lecter, but it's kind of tangential. They work with Hannibal Lecter. They don't necessarily make a deal in terms of like, okay, if you help us, you get 10 years off your sentence or whatever. But we do see that a lot, like in real life. So I just kind of wanted to ask about working with criminals to catch other criminals.
Yeah.
First of all, I know this is probably more of like a police than a lawyer, but I'm sure you're clued into the. How do those deals come about? Do the police go to the judge that sentenced that criminal and be like, hey, if he helps us do this, Can we knock off this, or how does that work?
Great question. So if it's someone that's already been convicted, like Hannibal Lecter, there's nothing that stops detectives from going in and talking with people that are inmates, and they can refuse if they don't want to talk to them. And we see that depicted in movies a lot, where they're in the middle of solving a crime and the key witness was actually in custody and they need to go talk to him. So those sorts of more casual conversations, interviewing witnesses while they're in custody, that happens all the time. That's not anything unusual or different. That doesn't require any communication. It's just a discussion, and that's that. When we're talking about a bigger level of cooperation, like what we see in this movie, I would imagine it would be less about talking to the judge. It would definitely involve talking to that original prosecutor. It would just be bad form for the detective not to go through and deal with that and discuss that. But if you were going to modify the original sentence, you're absolutely right. You would have to go and talk to a judge. So somebody who says, we see this sometimes in like Suicide Squad, right? Come in and do this total dangerous mission and you'll knock, 10 years off of your 700-year life sentence that you have, And for those sorts of modification of sentences, you're going to have to get judge approval of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a jail or a prison can't do an early release. We see this happen in Los Angeles all the time. Los Angeles jails are really crowded, and so they have policies there that, depending on the level of your offense, if it's a low-level offense and you get sentenced to 90 days in jail, you might do a weekend and then you're out because their jails are too crowded and they want to make sure that only the super bad guys are there. So jails do have some level of control over
the jails can potentially override a judge?
Yeah. So, for example, let's say that you were convicted of a crime.
Okay.
And your punishment was 90 days in jail.
Okay.
And you are in the county of Los Angeles. And you go in to serve your 90 days of jail. I would be shocked if you served more than a weekend.
That's not justice, though. Like if I was the person that person did a crime against, I'd be pissed.
Yes, and you'd be right to. The challenge also from a lawyer perspective is that we actually have to advise people you're going to serve half your time because that's what California state law says. You get half time off for good behavior. So if you get a 90-day sentence, by statute, you're going to serve 45 days of that. Okay, unless you're causing fights in custody or, being problematic. But this has been something that has been going on specifically in Los Angeles County for a really long time. Now, Orange County, no problem with that, which is just south of LA. Ventura County, just north of LA, which is where we are right now, they've got lots of space. It's no problem at all. You do your crime in Ventura County, you're doing all of your time. So no issue with that. But there's been litigation over the years, and the response to jail overcrowding has been early release. And you're right. If you're a victim, you're super angry about this. I had another issue that happened, though. We had a major change in California years back. This is probably 10 years ago,
right?
Where we changed our laws about drugs. And rather than locking people up for 90 days for being under the influence of drugs, we were now going to sentence them to a drug program instead.
Okay.
All of a sudden, overnight, the jail's cleared. Now, I had a client at the time who was going in to custody because he violated a restraining order against a neighbor about making too much noise. Okay. But he had done it so many times that it was finally to the point where not only was it out of the civil court with the restraining orders, and not only was it in the criminal court, and not only had he violated multiple times and was on violations of probation in the criminal court, but the judge was like, no, you're finally going to do some jail time. And so we ended up he agreed. We're going to do the judge wanted 60 days, which is a ton of time for violating restraining orders. But this was the level of pain in the neck this guy had been. What we didn't count. So I advised him, this is a weekend. Like, don't sweat it. You'll be out and you'll be back to your family later on in the week for Thanksgiving. No problem at all. Turns out that when the jails emptied, they didn't need to do early releases anymore. So he ended up doing 30 days and he wasn't super happy about that. But
oopsies,
exactly.
Maybe turn your music down.
Maybe, exactly.
So Hannibal Lecter kind of gives the first breadcrumb clue to Clarice. And she goes and she checks out that garage. Now, when she goes and checks out the garage, she finds the death head moth, the infamous one from the poster. But Clarice is just kind of following the trail, right? She doesn't have a warrant. Now, I think she has consent from the property owner, but she doesn't have a warrant. Does that make any difference?
In this case, it doesn't.
Okay.
Because she did have consent from the property owner. Okay. So because this is a storage unit, we have less privacy expectations in storage units in hotel rooms than we do in our own personal homes or our own personal garages.
Just for the sake of argument, let's assume she didn't have that consent. She just was told by Hannibal, go there, and she went.
Right. If she just went in and just decided to open the storage unit all on her own, then that would end up being an illegal search. And so at Buffalo Bill's trial, they could argue that they had no right to go into that storage unit. I don't remember whether the storage unit was actually rented out to James Gumb or if it was to a different person.
I think it was to a different person.
And I got the sense that it was a different person who wasn't with us anymore. That this was like a dead person's storage unit. So it would be that person who would have the standing to object. And so if they use evidence in my case, but they illegally search your garage to find evidence in my case, I don't have standing to argue that the search of your garage was illegal because it wasn't my rights that were violated. It was your rights that were violated. But you probably aren't going to go and argue that because
it just creates a wormhole. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, why? So, I mean, could the heirs of the owner of the storage unit, who's not really the owner, but like the renter of the storage unit, maybe object or something? Maybe.
Couldn't Clarice just kind of bend the rules a little bit in that case and just be like, I found it in his backyard, like no one but her knows where that came from.
Yeah.
And Hannibal, and he's not going to show up to that,
Right. For some of this, what it ends up being is an issue of how are they using the evidence, right? So if they're using the evidence as evidence to convict somebody versus following the trail, there's an argument in evidence that anything that is tainted evidence, everything that comes from that goes away and is tainted. But if we think about it in here, the evidence that they find is the head. They end up finding the moth. And so then they start looking at moths a little bit more often. But I don't know that it was really the discovery of the moth that necessarily brought them to his actual residence and the rescue of the senator's daughter. I think that it was establishing some credibility with Lecter. That was part of it. I think it was dealing with the idea of the butterfly or the moth and and the cocoon and larva and all of the stuff that was going on with that. But I don't know that this was the key. It certainly was the start, but like you said, Lecter is dangling breadcrumbs and trying to earn some credibility with Clarice here.
Let's talk about Buffalo Bill. Because, we see him kidnap the senator's daughter, and she's not the first one that's done it. Takes it back to his house, drops her in the pit. I mean, just from what you saw, like, what is Buffalo Bill looking at?
He's looking at kidnapping. Okay. And just for the charge with the senator's daughter. So it's an assault and a kidnapping.
But keeping her in that pit has got to be something too, right?
That's false imprisonment.
Okay.
But false imprisonment doesn't have the same amount of teeth as a kidnapping.
Okay.
So keeping somebody against their will is just a false imprisonment charge. So, if you voluntarily came into this room and nobody forced you to come into this room, but I locked the door, now I'm falsely imprisoning you. Right. So that's a separate crime. Now, on the other hand, if I pulled you into this room or brought you into this room at gunpoint, then I'm kidnapping because I'm forcing you to move.
Okay.
Kidnapping is the movement of a person, where false imprisonment is trapping somebody in a place.
Yeah. False imprisonment, they came and you won't let them leave.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, imagine on top of all that, you find his suit that he...
Yes.
What is that? Like, I mean, clearly that involved some sort of killing, but like
right.
making a suit out of... I mean, it's happened in real life. It's based on, was it Ed Gein?
Yeah.
I mean, what did they even charge that? Human suitifying?
Yeah. I mean, imagine for a second, we'll rotate the lens slightly, and imagine if instead someone was worked at a mortuary and was taking skin off of bodies at a mortuary, right? So no murder involved at all.
Sure.
Well, that still is desecration of a corpse, and there are health and safety code violations with that, and there are criminal charges for that if you are doing things to a corpse that you shouldn't. And so peeling the skin off of a corpse, not okay. Now, on the other hand, we do have organ donor statutes and things along those lines, and people who agree to donate their bodies to science, and family members who agree to donate their family members' bodies to science. So if all of the permissions were intact and it was done scientifically and forensically, could a doctor or a scientist decide they want to see what happens if you make a bodysuit? I mean, as long as there's permissions from the people, right? Whether it's I agree that I'm going to donate this beautiful body to a bodysuit somewhere down the line, or if my family says, yeah, you know what Dad always wanted? He always wanted to be a bodysuit.
He wanted to be worn.
He wanted to extend his life
like a nice fur.
Yuck. So I mean that would be how we would analyze that part of it. Now, if it's unlawfully done, then all the health and safety code violations and all that. In this case, assuming that he survived and assuming that he was taken to trial, it wouldn't necessarily be worth it for them to also charge him with that. But on the other hand, there are times where there are cases where they just stack up every single crime. And for that, it's more for the benefit of the victims' families than it is everything else. Like, no, we're not just going to give him a murder charge. We're also going to give him a desecration of a corpse charge. We're also going to give him unlawful transportation of a body charge or whatever. Right. And that's the cases where you see somebody getting multiple life sentences, even though they'll never end up serving that much time.
See, to me, Buffalo Bill fits the bill for insanity a lot more than Hannibal Lecter.
For sure.
He seems like maybe he isn't quite in touch with reality, whereas like Hannibal knows everything he's doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, we never really get in this film to the question of why Hannibal does what he does. We do spend a lot of time with Buffalo Bill figuring out the why. There's a whole discussion about the fact that he wants to be transgender and might have been turned down from several prominent clinics trying to get a sex change operation. And I know that I'm using words that are dated when I talk about that.
Well, that was one thing when this movie came out. There was a lot of a backlash and uproar that, people were saying, like, why does the serial, like trying to equate, serial killers and all these things. I didn't take it as that when I watched it, at least the first time. I could totally see how that could feel a little exploitative.
Yeah.
But again, this was 1990. It was kind of a sign of a lot of society's thoughts.
Oh, for
about
sure.
that at the time.
And we definitely use completely different terms, and that's why I caught myself for a second. I mean, when I use the terms that they used in the movie, those aren't exactly the terms that we would talk about now. But when you have someone who's decided so passionately that they want to be a different gender enough to kill people and wear their skin and make a woman suit so that they look like a woman, that's terrifying, and no question that would fit the insanity defense 100%.
So, in that final confrontation with Clarice, she does shoot him dead. So I guess my question would be at that point, if he's dead, is there even going to be a trial?
No. There's no need at that point. We don't do trials for dead people.
Yeah.
And so and there's two different lines of thought about that, right? On the one hand, he's dead and arguably got justice for what he did. On the other hand, there's another argument that the victims' families never got that closure and got the sense of justice.
Right.
And then on the other hand, the victims' families don't have to go through that horrible aspect of going through trial and sitting and reliving it and dealing with all of those things again. So there's lots of different ways of looking at the fact that he's dead and there will be no trial, but there would be no trial for this case at all.
Yeah, I don't know how I would feel about that, because I can totally understand kind of the justice. I don't feel like I got justice. It just so happened that he was shot, and that has nothing to do with me. But at the same time, I wouldn't have a good answer for, okay, well, who deserves to pay for his sins then? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of those bigger existential philosophical questions that the legal justice system just isn't designed to address.
I don't think his family, if he had one, deserved to, and I wouldn't, at the end of the day, I wouldn't feel any closure with that either. Cause I'm you had nothing to do with this. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't punish, mafia justice of, taking out everybody that he's ever cared about.
Okay. So Buffalo Bill, not the only one to skin some people in this movie.
This is true.
We mentioned earlier the great escape scene from Hannibal Lecter. He cuts a man's face off.
Yes, he does.
And he makes a mask out of it to get out of there, which is just bonkers.
Yes.
So I asked you this a little tongue-in-cheek, but why not?
Sure.
Identity fraud? He is pretending to be someone else.
He
get
is
in restricted areas.
He is, and this would be like citing someone for a speeding ticket after they killed 25 people driving down the wrong side of the freeway drunk. I mean, so no, they would not waste their time also with identity fraud.
So what's it's murder. There's no way that guy lived, right?
Well, if it's not murder, it goes back to our Freaky Friday episode with Mayhem.
Baby.
But truly,
pierce those ears while you're at it.
Cutting a person's face off definitely counts as major disfiguring of a face. So,
are you telling me no one just walked by? I was like, that guy's face is kind of weird. That doesn't look right.
Well, and when we're it's hard to watch it closely for analysis because I get squeegee about the whole thing. It's not great. But having said that, there's just so much of like blood and flesh and everything else in these aspects of it that it makes it very hard to see what's up. You don't. I mean, also it tricked us.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
The first time you see it,
every step through that, you don't know for sure that they've got the wrong person until it's way too late. I mean, almost until the police do.
Right.
At least I didn't figure it out.
No,
So,
the first time I saw it, no.
yeah. Well, because it's too horrible.
Right.
I mean, that's the brilliance of this. It is too horrible to imagine until it's actually revealed.
I don't know why I didn't figure out that was it, because that was like a big joke from an episode of The Office where Dwight cuts off the CPR dummy's face and then wears it and he's like, "Hello, Clarice." I didn't put two and two together while watching the movie. Like when is that part coming? You know?
Yeah.
But it's great. So on top of that, he's escaped. What's like the official crime of escape? Is it just...
There is an escape crime.
Okay.
Yeah. So escaping a custodial facility. So, I mean, that in and of itself is a crime. He's way more in trouble for all of the, murders and mayhems that he commits along the way than he is the actual escape. But yeah, he would be good for escape as well.
Do you think that there's any liability on the side of the FBI for even involving him in this? Because essentially they kind of gave him an open door to pull a prank like this. Not a prank, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Knowing how hyper intelligent he is and knowing like he's been plotting this since the first scene she walked in, most likely.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and we believe that they should have known better.
Right.
You know, we believe that. But also, we are solidly in the shoes of the FBI as we're going through this. The way it's shot, the way it's brought through. So we're right there with them on. Okay, there's a breakout. Okay, he's now changed clothes. He's now in a police uniform. It's the other officer who's in the white prison garb. I mean, all of those steps, we are drawn along equally. I mean, it's such a perfect orchestration of scenes and editing and all of that. I think that between the shift of, or the switch of clothing, the face, all of that, and then he fakes like some sort of cardiac arrest or something by twitching out and all of that aspect of it too. So I think that the FBI would likely have some explaining to do about why they even allowed this person to get out of the dungeon hole, in the first place. But it's very, very difficult to hold them accountable civilly, for all of these things. I mean, you'd have to show that there was a complete reckless disregard for safety of others. And, a lot of those guards, a lot of those police officers, that's part of their job is to guard dangerous criminals.
Right.
But if I'm related to one of those officers that got taken out by Lecter, I'm definitely going to at least file suit.
Wrongful death.
Yeah. And see what happens.
It's tough because the movie also presents Hannibal Lecter in a way where they're trying to get us to kind of root for him in a way, because he does have like principles. Like the whole reason he denies Clarice at first, "I'm not talking to you." The only reason he does is because another inmate disrespects her with bodily fluid, and he's so upset about kind of the disrespect that he turns around.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's part of his plan to show them that I do have like a moral compass in here.
Yeah.
And if that's the thing, you go back and you start to think like, was everything manipulation?
Right.
Or does he really have some sort of honor code?
Right. I mean, Clarice talks about it at the end, right? She says, it wouldn't be polite, I'm not worried about him coming for me. He just wouldn't find it, polite to do that. And the fact that we're talking about a guy who cuts off faces, who then we can put some sort of boundary around because it wouldn't be polite. It just goes to the strength of the character and the level of crazy. But what if the being polite was all just a ruse to get her to trust him, and she's in danger? Which is why they notify her immediately, which is why they offer her the protection, and why they identify her as somebody who's likely at risk. But then also, Lecter takes the time to be polite and to let her know that he's not planning on giving her a visit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, that this happens after graduation. He calls her at the reception, and basically he's, now he's far away. He's going to get that was it a doctor or
a doctor? Yeah.
Who really pissed him off earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
Once Clarice hangs up that phone, what kind of obligation does she have? So full disclosure, I never saw Hannibal because Gary Oldman looked way too gnarly for me to sit through. I was like, nope, can't do that.
I watched Hannibal is the sequel, right?
Right.
Yeah. I watched some of it, and it was some of the most disturbing. That may have been like the thing that broke me off of like gross stuff, because there's some gross scenes in that movie.
It seemed like they doubled down on like the cutting off the face part instead of the psychological horror. But so I don't know if that movie opens with her on the manhunt for Hannibal, or if he just shows back up in her life. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't even think she's in it, if I remember correctly.
Well, it's Julianne Moore this time takes over the role from Jodie Foster. Because Jodie Foster was like, nah, I'm good.
All I remember is a scene where he cuts off the top of somebody's skull while
it's
they're alive.
Ray Liotta, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I'm good. But, does Clarice, I guess going back to what I was saying, like, does Clarice have an obligation to go after Hannibal, since it was kind of like her contact, her responsibility? Now he's out on the loose. I don't know how vigorously she's looking. Like, she doesn't seem that worried. Like, well, he's not coming for me, so
Well, you got to believe that at least the Clarice Starling that we know in Silence of the Lambs probably would feel an obligation to want to continue that investigation. I think that Jack Crawford, her boss, would probably take her off that assignment. And I think that Clarice is as much of a rule follower as she seems to be.
Right.
She would very likely follow that, but I got to believe she's got a closet in the back somewhere where she's got strings and is, doing her own little, Scooby-Doo investigation in the background.
Tons of banker boxes with like files and stuff.
Yeah. And somebody, 40 years from now is going to go back and realize she's been investigating it the whole time and she's the wise expert. I don't know.
All right. I'm going to guess this is going to be pretty quick and easy for you. Buffalo Bill.
Okay.
You taking him as a client if he had lived? If he had lived.
You deprived me of my joke.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Buffalo Bill,
it's
as
okay.
is.
As is. No. But no. And we've talked about this before. I do a lot of good work in my space. Mm-hmm. And, there are times where we will just say, like, this is too disturbing, too challenging, too bad of a case. And I am more suited for something that's not going to be all encompassing over the next several years. I mean, if he survived, and what were we talking about? 6, 7 victims, something along those lines, or I don't remember how many victims there were, but even if there were only 3, that is an all-consuming 100% of your time and probably an entire fleet of attorneys and staff and investigators and preparation and whatever. The other challenge with a case like that is that there's no way that there's any sort of negotiation or plea bargaining going to be happening in a case like that, which I'm really good at the negotiation problem solving aspect of cases, which means it is just a law school jury trial and making sure that every possible defense is scratched at. And then after he's convicted and sentenced to multiple life sentences, then we'll start the appellate process where other attorneys who all they do all day is pick apart what happened at a jury trial will suggest then for the next 25 years that one question that I phrased wrong in a cross-examination could have been flipped around backwards, and maybe that would have made a difference in front of the jury. And therefore, all of my tactics end up being called into question for the entire appeals period. And that is something that would probably outlast my life. And I just don't have any desire to be involved with that.
Sounds like there's no upside to taking it.
No. I mean, there are some people who really enjoy doing murder cases because they're looking to fight the innocent. Fight for the innocent, right? Not fight the innocent. Fight for the innocent. I want to fight the innocent guy. No, fight for the innocent and pursue justice. There are some people who really like to do murder cases because they are technicians who really want to preserve the integrity of the system and make sure that the process is held and all of those things. Most of my decisions on selecting clients are people that we can lift out of bad situations, dust them off, put them back on their feet, and send them on their way. With this, it's not that. It's just a completely different job.
Let me ask you this as just an aside. Everything that happens in this movie, all the crimes, anyone that you would be defending, they're all really gnarly, and they're all like really hard to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I assume at least once or twice in your career, if not a lot more, you've had cases where you've had to look at stuff that's just hard to close your eyes at night and not see it. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, I appreciate you asking that question. I've seen lots of stuff that I wish I could just extract from my mind. Really powerful scene. This is going to sound like a non sequitur. I promise it isn't.
Okay.
In Harry Potter,
okay,
where we see Dumbledore pulling out a thought out of his head with his wand and dropping it into the pensieve, and there are times where I wish I had that ability. And I won't list them here,
sure,
and I won't burden you with
sure,
them. But I can list them. The things that I wish that I could unsee that I have seen. Some of them happened when I was a prosecutor. Some of them involve autopsy photos that were really hard to watch. Some of them involve when I prosecuted sex crimes and things that I had to see doing those cases. And it's just, unfortunately, something that I've absorbed, and I just do my best to try to balance out the rest of my life with wonder and laughing and smiles and characters of Doug, and
No, I mean, like, you are probably the most positive person I know, but I just, like, I always think like it's usually comedians who are the ones that are suffering the most on the inside. Like, I can't imagine like having to look at probably all the graphic photos of what ended up becoming Buffalo Bill's suit, and someone had to.
It's really, really hard. And there are some people, you actually see a scene with Clarice in this, right? When she goes to the autopsy, and they're putting the little smelling salt stuff underneath their nose. It's a really interesting visual. And she takes a deep breath and she turns around, and you can see her face. She's horrified, and she's having such a hard time processing it. And then she takes a breath, she settles in, and she gets to work. Mm-hmm. And there are times, even as a lawyer, that we can do that, where we're like, okay, that was terrible, and now I need to get to work and really examine this and get going. And you can develop those skills. The problem is that it then desensitizes you for a lot of other stuff that's out in the world.
Yeah.
And so it impacts your other relationships. The last time I saw something that I wish that I couldn't see, it's been within the last week. So I mean, I'm not happy that something like that came across my desk that I had to see and that I ended up absorbing into my brain. But you know, I spend the time processing it, spend the time absorbing it, and then just do my best to live in the next moment, you know,
Right.
where we're talking about, you know, people's face getting cut off, you know, happier things like this. But it's also something that I talk on and I teach on. You know, I talk about vicarious trauma for lawyers and how we absorb trauma from cases, from things that we have to actually see and watch, or just the stories that we hear from clients
Sure, yeah.
and how hard of a time they're having with everything. So
One thing I feel like this movie does really well is like the palette and the cinematography. It is very somber, which I would imagine is how dealing with these things day in day out, everything feels kind of muted a little bit. You know?
If you think about the only bright color I can think about in the entire movie would be red.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Would be blood. Everything else is muted, like you talked
It's kind of
about.
gray skies,
Yeah.
beige. Yeah.
You know, even Buffalo Bill's, you know, place, you know, is these muted greens and
Grungy,
avocado-y
dim,
kind of, yeah. Ugh.
Okay. You know, she doesn't really do anything bad. I guess she got consent. I guess she shoots Buffalo Bill, but she's self-defense.
It's such a good shot. Yeah, I defend
Yeah.
If Clarice ever got into trouble, I would defend her all day. I think that she represents the best, you know, and is depicted that way. The one thing that we didn't talk about that I love about Clarice also that says so much about her courage, and especially in 1990 when this movie was made.
Right.
The autopsy scene where she goes in and she clears the room of all of the sheriff's deputies, the locals that are in the room. And like, you know, she would have wanted you to be here. We're going to take good care of her now. It's time to go. And nobody moves. Come on then. Shoot. Come on. It's time to go. And then her conversation in the car going back with her boss.
Yeah.
Having the courage to say, you know, I wish you hadn't excused me from the room. It matters. You know, when you treat me like lesser because I'm a woman, it matters. And the fact that she said that in a movie in 1990 was pretty darn cool.
It's crazy to me that when people talk about strong female characters, they usually say Ripley or they say Sarah Connor, but it's crazy that Clarice does not come up more in these conversations, especially because they don't do it in like an exploitative girl power way. Like she's just a strong character.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. The fact that she could hold her own against Hannibal Lecter says everything.
And I think that's why he respects her enough to basically play this little game with her, you know?
Yeah.
It's probably the first person he's met in years that can, you know, match with him.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Hannibal Lecter.
Okay.
So, yes, lots of police killings and cutting off face. But you could also say that they never would have caught Buffalo Bill and rescued the senator's daughter if it wasn't for him. So, what are you thinking?
Well, for me, it's not me and it's not my case. So
Okay.
that's the easy answer.
Sure.
But as far as, you know, what you would end up doing, let's say that he was caught at the end of the ambulance ride rather than getting away and heading off to the airport or, you know, however he escaped. I believe that someone would need to make those arguments. He's already been declared insane or whatever legally, procedurally had been done with him to put him in the mental hospital and to keep him in the mental hospital. So there's no question that he is already that person.
Right.
And he's already been diagnosed as that person. And so there's arguments there that, well, of course, when given the opportunity, when his doctor leaves a pen behind, he's going to do that. You
Right.
know, we've done a lot of giving him the credibility of how smart he is, right? And how orchestrated and planned he is. But is there an argument there somewhere that he couldn't even help himself when given the opportunity to hurt someone? It's the reason why they tell Clarice not to step over the line in front of the cell. It's the reason why they have the perimeter all the way around. If he didn't escape, would he have hurt those people just to hurt those people? There might be an argument there that he would. So
it's tough because they purposefully don't show us the whole hand of cards that he has, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing with Hannibal Lecter. Maybe that's why, even though he has like 12 minutes of screen time, we're so drawn to him, because how many times have I seen this movie? I still don't know exactly what he's thinking the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the fact that we are as fascinated about him, the fact that this movie ends up being a movie about Hannibal Lecter, it's not.
Right.
I mean, this is a murder mystery about a guy that's kidnapping and skinning girls.
Right.
That's what this movie is about, except it's not. Except it's about silencing the lambs. So, I mean, it's that journey between a brilliant psychologist who's manipulating a new FBI agent. That's the story. So I think that the fact that he is that level of insane already, he would end up very easily qualifying for any sort of additional insanity defense, and the punishment he would have would probably just be adding on to the already existing multiple life sentences.
Yeah.
I think Hannibal Lecter, post Silence of the Lambs, if he was caught, his life would not have been substantially different.
I just if someone that brilliant who knows things about, he seems to be a guy who knows everything about everything. It's like no crime happens without Hannibal Lecter somehow knowing about it. Would you even want to let him go for any reason? Like, it seems like an asset, an FBI asset that,
put him on the bus with the secret equipment.
Put him on the bus, either that or, essentially what they promised him, which he could have had, which was like, you want a way better, nicer cell,
Yeah.
Do you not want to live in a dungeon? Do you want to live in like a nicer, maybe a Magneto plastic cell,
right? But instead he gets a wig and a really nice suit and is down in Havana or wherever the hell.
And again, I couldn't tell you, because I didn't watch it, how Hannibal ends. So I don't know, because the next one they did after Hannibal was Red Dragon, which takes place before Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe he dies in Hannibal. I couldn't tell you.
And anybody who's watched those things, let us know.
Yep.
But yeah, you can spoil it because I don't even care. I hate spoilers more than anything, but I'm never watching the rest of Hannibal. I don't even know if I finished it. I couldn't tell you how that movie ended.
I'm good. Literally, I saw one picture of the Gary Oldman makeup. I was like, I cannot watch a movie of that. That is too much.
Ugh.
Too much. But you know what's not too much?
Tell us.
All of the old episodes of Doug Defends.
This is true.
Right here on the YouTube channel. We've got Batman. We've got Superman. We got Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
We even have Titanic.
Right. Friends.
Right. Go watch Friends. Friends is a good one.
Friends is a great one. We got to do round 2 of Friends.
We got to do round 2 of Friends. It's all right here on the YouTube channel. Give us a like. Give us a sub if you haven't subbed already. Or if you want to take us in your ears, we are on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. There's probably an app just called Podcasts.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're there. I signed us up for everything, so we're probably on a whole bunch of stuff that I've never even heard of, but maybe you have. So look for us there. Next week is I'm very excited. Tune in next week, and you'll get to see us very dapper.
Yes,
and it's going to be a very dapper affair.
We have some awards to give.
We have some awards to give out, and we want to give one to you for being the best audience ever. So come right back next week for a new episode of Doug Defends.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.